I'm Stefan Baumann and welcome to the Baumann Effect 17. Today we're going to do part 2 of trees. Now if you haven't watched part 1 of trees, be sure to catch that at Baumann Effect number 16. But this is Baumann Effect number 17 on trees. We're going to be talking about Rob Ross and my passion for him as a painter. We're going to be talking about the armature of a tree and how to actually paint these trees with a fan brush. We're going to learn how to do pine trees and eucalyptus trees and moss-laden trees. We're also going to be talking about our relationship to the trees and the horizon line. We're going to be talking about tree perspective and a sense of place. We're also going to be talking about composition and a whole lot more in this Baumann episode. So if you want to know the secrets of painting trees, you're going to get a lot of information from this one particular video. So sit back and relax and watch this episode on painting trees, and I'll talk to you on the other side. The way I suggest, and the way that the old masters used to paint trees, is that they would put the base of the tree in. And when you're outdoors painting, this is a thing to consider. Skies come and go, they change. You can almost put them in at random when you're done, or in the studio. A lot of times I like to just leave my sky alone, because oftentimes it's just more to deal with than what I really need to when I try to get the rest of the painting done. Remember, most plein air paintings are done in 2 hours, so you pick and choose things that you really want to work with. But when we watch William Alexander or Bob Ross, when they're painting, they paint the whole sky in, and then they put their happy trees on top, and you think, well, that makes sense. Until you start putting your sky in, and then you put your tree in, and all of a sudden all the blue from your sky starts to go into your tree, and everything starts getting muddy, and you run into all kinds of problems. That's not the way to go about doing trees. What you want to do, and if you could see these in the old masters, if you have access to a Manet or a Monet, access to a Corot, all French Impressionists, if you look at a Thomas Moran or a Bierstadt, you'll notice first thing that the shadow colors are relatively thin. So that's one of the keys. If this is all blue in here in the background, it's really difficult to get the canvas real thin in those areas to get you started. So we kind of want to remember the darks are thin, your highlights are thick. Skies tend to be more light, so we want to paint them on thickly, which makes it really difficult to paint them if they're already in. So we go back in reverse. So to kind of show you, we'd start off with some darks and just get a little bit more brown in the center. And what we're going to do is we're going to do sky holes. And if you want more information on this, the only book I recommend to get is this, Carlson Guide to Landscape Painting. Now, this is the Bible. This is all you need. I've got a book coming out on plein air painting, yes, but it has more to do with the brain and the ideas. But if you want to learn how to do plein air painting, this is the guide. And the thing is, it's a real simple read. It was done by arts and science books in the 40s. And you can still buy these. And the amazing thing about this book is that the shipping alone will cost more than the book itself. I mean, it's been reprinted and reprinted. It is the Bible. So, Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. We have the base of the tree in. There's nothing in here that really matters. It's just a design element. And if we were to do a full-on landscape, we would have a tree here and then a tree in the background, get the dimensions and the composition together. And then we would start painting the sky. And this is where we start putting in the outside of the tree. Now, I had some questions about what about mossy trees? What about oak trees? I think we did oak trees, but what about pine trees? What about? So let me just kind of go in. You would actually do this. You would paint the sky after you get your base in. My favorite tree painter is a Russian artist by the name of Shishkin. If you don't know Shishkin, like I know Shishkin, then you should go and look him up. Amazing, amazing forest painter. But you know, Bierstadt, the American painters, fabulous painters. Thomas Moran, I would say that a lot of my influences were Bierstadt early on, and then I fell in love with Thomas Moran. And the difference between the two is that Bierstadt was a little bit more flamboyant, a little bit brighter, less paint, more illustration. And Thomas Moran was the crafty art. Paint on canvas, beautiful, especially towards the end of his life. So let's go in. I don't think Shishkin ever painted eucalyptus trees. I don't think very many artists have ever painted eucalyptus trees, but eucalyptus trees, yes, especially when you're in Australia or San Francisco. Okay, so we'd go in and put the sky in, and you could see that the tree still kind of lacks a little bit of form. And what we would do now is that we would actually go in now. I would probably suggest when I lay in my base that I would put in, let's just put in just kind of a ghost trunk of some kind, just to kind of lay it in. It's good for me to kind of do that because while I'm demonstrating, I don't have to think so much. But you know, when we're talking about the moss trees or the eucalyptus trees, they kind of have this hanging feeling. And so while you're painting the negative shapes, you're actually going to be pulling upwards. I'm going to do this a little larger so that you can kind of see. But you see that hanging effect? That's the quality of eucalyptus trees. Now, when I put the bird holes in last time, I kind of did the surrounding areas to have a feeling of oak trees. So they were a little harder and a little bit more like puzzle pieces. Well, eucalyptus trees, in the inside of the tree here, we would actually, again, have that hanging quality. So we would actually go in that way, and probably I should have painted my base a little bit darker. As you know, I'm not a big fan of stretch canvas anymore. In fact, when I talk about my beginnings, I fell in love with James Featheroff. And the first painting I saw of his was a painting done on panel. And I asked my teacher at the time, Ron Villa, I said, how do you paint on panel? And he said, someday I'll show you. But he never did, so I had to figure it out myself. But, so this is an ampersand board only because it's handy. But you can just get medium density fiber board, MDF board, at the hardware store. And like I say, you can get somebody there for a few bucks to cut up all of it that you want, at 4 foot by 8 foot. You'll go home with a whole trunk full of pieces. And then go over to the Auto Prime store. The Auto Primers, the paint section where they have everything in a spray can. And go get Rust-Oleum primer, white. And I would bet that's how they do this. But I'm not quite sure. But the thing is, you get the same effect. And a board like this from Ampersand could cost you $8 to $12, $15. I'm not quite sure. I just snagged this at the store here real quick. I'll find out after I get done here. My students have figured out for 98 cents they can actually get a board cut and primed. And you know, it's as good as anything. What is more archival than Rust-Oleum auto primer that you stick on the outside of a car? That's going to last ever, far longer than any gesso product that you're going to put on your canvases. So, and I'm not sponsored by either the MDF board company, Home Depot, or Rust-Oleum. Okay, these are just my observations. Okay, so I'm putting in the bird holes, going up. Now, I might have a branch here. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter than I would. hopefully you can kind of see that. So we would have a branch there, obviously, because it's a carry-on, the branch goes across the tree there. The top of these branches wouldn't have any form on them. All of the action happens below. So anything that you're going to put in kind of has to have that pull from the top. Now, another thing about doing this way, people are going, but you're putting a dark color in as a base, and now you're putting in light blue on top of that to do your bird holes. Isn't that going to make the bird holes kind of muddy? Well, if you read Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, and if you do some observation yourself, so if you just want to just listen to me and not have to do all that work, what you want to kind of understand is that when we're looking outside of the tree, this is going to be a cooler blue or lighter blue. The holes that are inside the tree here will be a shade or a half a shade darker than what's going on the outside, and that's to compensate for the shade of the light and the way that the light kind of compresses in those areas. So the bird holes will actually be a little bit darker, and without changing your color. By picking up some of that darker color underneath, you're actually going to automatically darken those holes just enough.
That may answer the question on the line themselves.
Okay. So pull up. Now, if you're going to be doing mossy trees in Alabama, down at the swamps, it's the same thing. You might have a bigger pull. So you have these mossy negative shapes here. But it all just depends on how the shape of the tree is. And you can kind of see, can you see how it kind of hangs? Eucalyptus trees have much shorter leaves, but they all kind of hang. They also have wonderful bark. I love painting eucalyptus trees. We have a lot of them in the Bay Area that were brought in. San Francisco is built on sand dunes, and they needed something that would block the wind, so they imported eucalyptus trees from Australia. And then they wish they hadn't, because they're kind of a messy tree. But they're sure beautiful to look at. So, and again, pull up. And I'm going a little lighter on here so that it shows on film. And then anything that you're going to put in, like smaller bird holes, you want to always kind of put in bird holes that are like vertical. Yeah, so any little bird holes that you might put in. Yeah. But you kind of have to make sure that the inside of the bird holes are organic, especially towards the top. Because if you don't do this right, it kind of looks like somebody's taken a bunch of plastic shopping bags and tied them all onto the tree. So they have to be in the right place and so on. If we were going to do more of this to make it look like it's a eucalyptus tree or a mossy tree, then we'd actually go down and we could start adding some more foliage in, add some darkness. Some of these bird holes that you've stuck in already, they're going to be foliage on the other side of the tree. So you're going to put some darks this way. And I want to get into doing some pine trees halfway through, and I want to get some painting too. But anyway, so it's kind of crucial when you put your bird holes in. Always remember that you've got a trunk in there that you've got to work around. You've got littler branches that go in. Once you get the bigger bird holes in, then you can go in with a smaller brush and put in all of the extra added goodies. A few more branches here and there. And I think you kind of get the message here, so I don't need to be here all day showing you that, because I know some of you live in the Sierras. So let's smear that. I call them bird holes because I kind of visualize birds flying through those holes. Again, that's my term. Some people might go by it, but they're usually called sky holes. But sometimes you put the bird holes in and you don't have sky behind them, you actually have more trees behind them. And the same thing would apply. We're all familiar with Rob Ross, and it's because of Rob Ross. I actually created a PBS show called The Grandview. But we were out in Yosemite and we were painting, and people said, oh, Stefan, we got to figure out a way to make this happen so that people can enjoy painting outdoors. Now, this is 1980, so painting outdoors wasn't even a thing. In fact, most people were painting in acrylics and in watercolors, and they were painting in studios from photographs. Now, there were people that were painting like myself, plein air, and working from life, but it wasn't really a fad like it is now. So, you're familiar with the fan brush tree, Bob Ross's, like happy little tree. Let's just do one. So he'll start off at the beginning. Sometimes he'll put that in with a palette knife. And the thing is, we do love him because he inspires people to become artists like ourselves. So some of you sitting at home, how many of you right now are painting because you had watched a Bob Ross show sometime in your life when you were little? Just put a thumbs up out there or hearts or something so we can see who out there was inspired by Bob Ross. How many of you are still inspired by Bob Ross? Yes, yes. So I get a lot of students that will call up and they'll say, yeah, I've been painting for 20 years. And I go, oh, send me some of your work. And the work that they end up sending me is, Bob Ross's paintings. And they go, yeah, I kind of like it, but I think I need to get a little bit more maturity. So, now see, I just wiped that off. Go, why did he do that? Because I messed up. I got to pay attention sometimes here. Okay, so I'm going to take a fan brush. This is not a Bob Ross fan brush. And I'm going to put a tree dead center just because, it's there. So, and I want you to notice, I'm not going from the bottom up. I'm going from the top down. This is a soft Dynasty fan brush, which I've recommended before. It's nylon, and I'm kind of painting on the side, so it might be a little squiggly, but there you go, see? All right, so there's going to be your trunk of your tree. Get a little bit more, okay? Then Bob Ross would add a little bit of green to this, and he would say, make some happy trees. Does this look familiar? It's like this, like this. And just boom, 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 boom. And if this were a bristle brush, it would be a little bit more like that. But that's pretty much what you probably remember back when you'd watch Bob Ross paint. And it actually was pretty good, but let's just talk a little bit about the initial armature that tree sits in. And there's some important things that artists don't talk about, but they're important to know even at this stage. Do I have your attention here? You might want to sit really close to the screens if you can't get there, because this is good stuff. All right. The armature. So the armature first is the trunk of the tree. But I want you to kind of look purposely at this and notice that when you're putting pine trees on, it's good to have kind of this back and forth rhythm. Back and forth, back and forth, back, this way, this way, this way, this way, zigzag all the way down. That way you don't end up with something that looks like a ladder. So what we're actually looking at when we're looking at these Bob Ross trees, and I'm not quite sure if there's an episode where he explains this, but what we're looking at is a form of a tree that goes back and forth like this. So if you're having a hard time dealing with trees, that's a very good formula to kind of think about while you're painting, is actually have that zigzag. And then you would do the Bob Ross magic on top of those, and then that way you won't look like a ladder. Otherwise it looks like it goes like, boom, 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 straight up. And believe me, I've coached a lot of students, and that's what shows up are trees that look like ladders. So anyway, so going back and forth is a good way. That's a good thing. Okay, now, with that foundation, a question was asked about what about the golden mean? And this is, advanced stuff. So some of you who are just beginning and want to kind of just watch somebody paint, this might start going over their head. But yeah, Leonardo da Vinci and the old Greeks and stuff, when they built things, they had something what they call divine proportion, golden mean, all of that stuff. It's the formula for it is 1.618. Now, for those of you that like to do a lot of research, I have a couple of videos in my videos on YouTube, and I discuss how to actually work with that. But they call it like divine proportion, golden mean, a lot of other little things. It's kind of based on a nautilus shell. And so if we actually look, let's do some finger painting. If we actually look at a nautilus shell that's kind of shaped like this, this would be the opening, okay? So this first measurement here would be 1.618, and that's where this would be. And then you divide the remaining surface by 1.618, and that's where you would get this, and then you get this. And you can do this for canvases too, and it gets smaller and smaller. And some of you have seen those nautilus shells, illustrations for a gym. They also have them if you study prehistoric things. But everything in this world is kind of developed that way. So the philosophy is that even the hand is broken up into these different segments. So how does that apply to trees? It's like, aha, Stefan. Okay, so the way that applies to trees is, again, we have that trunk. And if we'd actually start measuring, this is that divine proportion, 1.618 would be here. Next one would be here. Just like a nautilus shell, it gets bigger. The separation of the tree gets bigger and bigger. So the branches actually get decreasingly smaller. This will probably be here. And we all practice this science. And when we're doing trees, we're all practicing this science. In fact, women who have intuition, feminine intuition and stuff, they're really good at this. But, when you bring a couch into your living room and you kind of stand around and you look at it and you go, and you just knee it and just push it just that much, that little bit, and you go, there, that's perfect. That's basically the golden mean. That's like, in this room, everything is proportionate. The Parthenon is built that way. It's an innate rhythm that we go by in life. So it's kind of good to kind of know how to work with that. But trees have that too. So you'll have trees that have, the bottom of the trees you'll notice are separated more, and as we go further up, they get tighter and tighter and tighter. That's based on the golden mean. And of course then, if we would go back and forth, we would actually go back and forth wherever these measurements are. Okay. So one of the problems that people have, well, there's a couple of them we'll discuss here quickly. How much time do we, Jesus. This hour goes by so fast. That's why I love the Patreon station, because I get to play a little bit more. So, first thing, if you're going to do a tall tree, you want to make sure that the base of the tree has very little transition, that it doesn't go, because the base of the tree is going to be wider, and as it goes up, it gets narrower. And that's just kind of the law of physics there. Okay, so, and having too big of a brush to do that is also the law of physics, so I have to extend the tree. But anyway, so a lot of times people do tall trees. They want to show them that they're older. And the older they are, the more separated they are, the less that they change a lot. If you start off really fat and get narrow too quickly, the trees look too young. They just kind of grow outwards. So that's really an important key. Kind of keep in mind that you're going to do, a zigzag thing like this. Now, if we're standing here looking at this, and let me just kind of overemphasize, but if we're standing here and this is us, Okay, so here's your little hands. This is really an overly dramatized thing. But when we talk about the Baumann keys, one of my most important keys, and man, it is crucial, is the horizon line. And the horizon line is where your eyeballs are. It's not where the sky meets the mountains. It's not where the sky meets the ocean, although it is, because that's kind of what happens. But it's pretty much the horizon line is like right here. Okay, it's right where your eyes are. And if I kneel down, it's going to be down further. And if I go up, it's going to be a little bit higher. So where the horizon line is, that's where your eye level is. Okay, so my horizon line would actually be here. And I know he looks a little funny, but he's kind of posing like an artist. Ta-da! Anyway, so this is his head here, so that's the horizon line. So the branches on a tree at the horizon line are going to be going pretty much straight out. They might have a little dip down, but we're looking at them pretty much dead on. As we look further down at the bottom, lower part of the trees, we're usually seeing the top of the branch. So when we're doing Bob Ross trees, he just kind of does them straight on all the way up, and that's what makes them look like fake. But if we're looking down at the branches, we're seeing the top of the branch. And for the most part, we probably wouldn't even see the branch itself, or the wood part of the branch. We'd actually just see the skirt of the branch. We're looking at the top of the branch. Here we're looking at the branch, and we're usually not seeing the branches here. Where we start seeing the branches when we start looking up into the tree, up into the canopy here, and we start seeing that the branches that are holding up the tree, so we're looking up into that. So the perspective of the trees up here are done in such a way so we're looking up at them. They're different. These branches, as they come down, get straighter, and we're looking at them directly, and then down below we see them larger. And that's really an important key, is knowing that when you're putting together a tree, that you kind of have to know where your horizon line is, where your relationship is. As you look out at a tree, you're looking up or you're looking down at it. All right. Now somebody had asked me what was my favorite tree maker, and I said Bierstadt and Moran and all these Hudson River School artists, and they did have fan brushes back there, but you don't need a fan brush to do this. You can do it with a regular brush, but I'm going to show you the difference between Bob Ross and Stefan Baumann here, or any other artist. Again, thicker base, smaller as we get further up. And one thing to keep in mind, a couple of things. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because we're going to go over. One thing about doing any kind of branches is that you want to make sure, because I'll have students, they'll go in and they'll do branches and they look like this. They look like this, and they look like this, and then they look like this, and they look like this. And they go, well, what's wrong with that? They don't cross each other. Yeah, it's like they all go, oh, no, don't touch me. It's like they're all playing lava. So the way that branches are usually done is that you want to start off, and I oftentimes will start off from the outside where I want my branch, and I will go up to my tree, okay? But what I'll do is I'll purposely make sure I cross. See how I drop that branch down? I cross the other branch. I make sure that I have branches that cross branches. And I have branches that go in the back, and actually cross in the background and go back, and then I have branches that go forward. And so if you can kind of imagine my hand going up as a branch, how do you draw that twist that you get? That takes practice, and that's where you sit in front of a tree with your paints on the meadow floor, and you just sit there and you draw and you draw. So you want to make sure that the branches cross. As we get further up, we're looking underneath the branches, putting in the foliage. Now, Bob Ross, when he would work with a fan brush, he would do this. And this is the mistake that people have when they paint trees. Can you see that arch that the brush makes? They're like eyelashes going all the way up. In order to do foliage correctly, you never use the front of the brush. So if this is the brush here, and here's your fan brush like this, and this goes down like this, and then you have your fan brush like this, okay? You never use the whole brush like that. You only use one side or the other. So if you're going to be doing branches, you're going to hold the brush at a 45-degree angle, and you can kind of do it the way that I suggest, is like, you know, cup your hand this way, because I always want to kind of do that. But you only use this much of the brush, or this much of the brush. You never use the whole brush. And that will get away from this rhythm. With a fan brush, you kind of start at the end of the brush and you tip it, see at this angle? And you go in, and if you look at the old masters, even Manet, and this is kind of what they did. And they fiddle with the corner. Now, I know some of you are going to be looking for these Dynasty black gold brushes, thinking, Stefan's got the magic brush. But you can do this with any brush. I could do this also with just a flat brush. You don't have to have a fancy fan brush. But again, you want to take it from the corner. And it's not the brush. So don't blame the brush. But sometimes you'll buy a brush and it doesn't quite cooperate the first time. So you have to kind of use that brush a few times. And notice, I've done so many trees that notice how instinctually I've got that rhythm already happening. You don't notice it, but boy, if you don't put it in, it's not right. And then the same thing here. Now these branches are not going to have the same slant to them. They're actually going to be a little straighter. And I'm using just the corner of the fan brush there. And if you're really good, you can actually push your fan brush in, and it will actually even make a little bit of a stick in there to hold on to. Now, some of you are noticing I'm not using a lot of brushes today, and that's because you don't really need them. There's no reason why you have to have a lot of brushes. And brushes are expensive. And they're the most important thing to have because they're like your swords. If you don't have a good brush, it's a problem. But you don't have to have them either. But it is important to have good brushes, but not a lot of them. So. Go back and forth. Now, I like to skip a spot while doing these. I like to skip a spot where I just have branches all by themselves, kind of floating out there. And you see these fan brushes can do nice lines. You don't have to have a liner brush to do them. I know, but this stuff's important to know. So, and the thing that you kind of have to get when you're doing trees is that you've got to remember that you've got foliage behind the tree. You can't just have the tree dissected here and have the branches just kind of cut up there. You kind of have to have foliage that's behind the tree and some foliage that crosses the tree. It's a little more solid. Some few little dead branches. Another thing that you want to kind of keep in mind while you're doing trees is, and we'll talk about this in a future Baumann effect, is the sense of place. Now, one thing that I really frown upon with my students is having a tree that starts off here and comes into the painting. You should never have anything that comes into the painting from out here. You'd never have branches that hang off the corner. That technique is kind of, we're used to it because of photographers who take pictures and don't compose original paintings like we do and move things around. They have no option if there's a tree hanging off of that. So you have no option. You got to take that picture. But if we were there, we'd step in front of that tree. Wow, that's kind of cool. You step in front of the tree, and we would be painted here. We wouldn't want this thing in our face. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't have branches hanging down from the top. The old masters, if you look at them, they always compose the area. They weren't working from photographs, so they would get a sense of place. You'd have a good solid foreground that should be like the bottom third. And then everything that's inside of that painting should go into that bottom third. And then it's okay to have a tree that starts off in the painting and have it go out. In fact, I was looking at a couple of artists this morning on the internet, and what they had was all these trees going up, and they'd go right up to there, and then they would go right up to there. Actually, they kind of like almost like this, right up to there. But they don't want to go out of the top because they think they're breaking a rule. Thomas Hill, who was another California painter, he said, if you're going up to the top of the canvas and you're just about running into that, should I stop or shouldn't I stop? If you're right there, take it out. That's okay. That's it. If you're interested in more content, there's content all over YouTube. There's almost 300 videos. If you want to get coaching, give me a call. I'm accessible both on text and on phones. Just get that I'm really busy with 100 students. Patreon's a great place if you want to kind of ease into it. In the meanwhile, always remember, don't go into your studio unless you plan to change the world. And always remember to paint with passion. I'm Stefan Baumann, and thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you next week. Wow, that's a lot of information about a subject that is close to my heart, painting trees. If you'd like to get more information about my classes or my coaching, you can do so at www.stefanbaumann.com. And there you can register for a free book, Everything I Know About Painting. You can also find out more information about my workshops that I give up here at the Grandview Ranch. And I also have information there on my Patreon. Or you could go directly to my Patreon station at www.patreon and look for my name, Stefan Baumann. If you'd like to register for coaching, the best thing to do is just give me a call at 415-606-9074 and let's discuss the possibility of me being your coach. It's a lot of fun. It's the fastest way you'll get anywhere with your painting, guaranteed. So until the next time we meet, always remember, don't go into your studio unless you're going to change the world. And always remember to paint with passion. I'm Stefan Baumann. You have a grand day.